Discussion will be led by Ewan Walters, whom is already with me on the stage. He's a partner and the head of clean energy for the MENA region at Evershed Sutherland. Ewan specializes in corporate clean energy and sustainability and has a global extensive experience advising on clean energy projects. Please, can we give him a big round of applause? Let's also welcome our expert panel, whom is formed of Andrea Di Gregorio, Director of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Office of Ras Al Khaimah Municipality. Andrea, please join us. Faisal Rashid, the Energy Demand Director at Dubai Supreme Council of Energy. Stéphane Legentil, heading the energy efficiency activities at ENGIE in the Muscat region. And last but not least, Mustafa Anzi, leading the ESCO energy operations at Johnson Controls in the Gulf region. Thank you. Over to you, Ewan.
Thank you very much, and welcome to everybody. I think we've got around 50 minutes for this panel, so we'll have 40 minutes or so with the panelists talking about some themes that we want to talk about in the energy efficiency, and then we'll open it up to the floor for questioning. I'm told that there is a device on your phones that you can ask questions, so-called Slido. That was new to me, but I've just downloaded the, well, it's not an app, you just go to the website, and it's very easy. You type in CEBC 2019, and then you can ask questions. So I'd encourage everybody to do that so that we can then go through those questions at the end of the panel session. My name's Ewan Walters. I'm a partner with Evershed Sutherland. We're a law firm that focuses on a number of sectors, including the clean energy sector. I'm joined today on the panel by four others, Andrea, Faisal, Stefan, and Mustafa. So if I'll introduce them quickly. So we've got Faisal Rashid, who's a UAE national. Faisal is currently looking at the energy demand side in Dubai, and he's a director at the Dubai Supreme Council of Energy, looking after the whole energy demand management spectrum of the Emirate of Dubai. So welcome to you. I'd like to introduce Andrea. Andrea Di Gregorio is the Director of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy in the Emirate of Ras Al Khaimah, RAK. His mandate is to support the development of the Emirate towards lower energy intensity and a higher share of renewables in the generation mix. Prior to joining RAK, Andrea was supporting the activation of the Dubai Demand-Side Management Strategy at the PMO Director at the Dubai Supreme Council of Energy in the UAE. We then have Stefan from ENGIE. Stefan is heading the energy efficiency activities at ENGIE in the Middle East, South and Central Asia, and Turkey since January 2018. Prior to that, Stefan was the CEO at Wataka that he founded in November 2016. And in 2013, Stefan came to the UAE to create the Etihad ESCO, which was the Dubai government super ESCO. And that brings me on with a nice link to Mustafa, who is currently with Johnson Controls. He's responsible for the ESCO energy operations in the Gulf region. And prior to Johnson Controls, Mustafa was also with Etihad ESCO for 4 years. And before that, he was in the Netherlands. So welcome to all the panelists. I think we're going to focus on three areas in particular during this panel. So the first is the status quo of the current energy efficiency in the MENA region. We'll then focus on what are some of the market barriers to energy efficiency in the MENA region, and we'll bring in the Clean Energy Business Council survey on the energy efficiency in the MENA region at that point, because that's got some very useful feedback and information from the market about what some of the barriers are to energy efficiency in the MENA region and why we're not seeing more energy efficiency implemented. And then finally, we'll look at some of the instruments currently in play in the MENA region to encourage the use of energy efficiency in the MENA region. So if I can start by focusing on the first of the three areas that we want to cover, which is the current status quo. And if I can maybe start with Stefan from ENGIE and ask him in his experience to summarize what he's currently seeing in the MENA region on the energy efficiency side. And I know you're going to focus on some specific jurisdictions, and then we'll ask Mustafa to focus on some of the other jurisdictions in the MENA region.
Yeah, thank you. I think if we go back in time, maybe five, 6 years ago, energy efficiency was not really a topic in the region. It was also almost not known as something that can improve the energy consumption. And thanks to, I would say, Dubai was probably the first area where it started. And we started that with the TIADESCO, and then it spread it around in the region. And today you see a lot of activity, I would say, in specific countries. Not all the countries have moved, but it's very dependent, in fact, on the price of the electricity, because if the price of electricity is low, there's not a lot of interest to save energy. But in countries where electricity price is high, it has really picked up. And I would say this is the case today in the UAE, but also in Saudi Arabia, where we see a lot of activity going on right now in terms of energy efficiency. So we can elaborate a bit more later on, but I would say those are the two countries I see where there's a lot of activity right now.
Okay, thank you, Stefan. If Mustafa can give his perspective, I think on the UAE, Oman, Bahrain, and Kuwait, and what you're seeing there on the energy efficiency, that would be great.
Yeah. So what we see actually is that we are getting more and more inquiries also from other countries in the region for energy efficiency projects. So sometimes it's surprising because we know in some countries that the utility prices are very, very low. But then we understand that actually there is a drive from the company to reduce their carbon footprint, either locally or because of a corporate program to reduce the carbon footprint. So it's not always, let's say, the money that is driving this energy efficiency efforts, but also to reduce the carbon footprint. But in other countries in the region, we see that definitely the cost aspect is very important because the utility prices are increasing, subsidies are reducing, so the end user is feeling actually the impact of energy costs in their bottom line.
But before we come and ask the other two panelists maybe to talk about the UAE current status quo then, in the other jurisdictions that I mentioned, what, are you actively implementing energy efficiency programs in those countries at the moment then? And are you seeing an increasing demand for energy efficiency programs?
Yeah, definitely. So clients come to us and say, okay, we have a facility, we have a plant, and we need to reduce our energy consumption. How could you help us? So then we go and do our feasibility studies and come up with a report, a recommendation, and that also converts into, let's say, projects where we implement these projects.
Okay, so you'll do an energy audit, and then on the back of that, you'll have the implementation phase of that, the results of the audit.
Correct.
And from Stefan and Mustafa's perspective, then the two drivers you're seeing in the MENA region are to reduce energy demand and the costing of buying in that energy, firstly, and secondly is to have a better green footprint, I guess, for those companies. Yep. If I can then turn to Faisal and Andrea then, from a UAE perspective, and maybe start with you, Andrea. What are you seeing as the status quo in RAC at the moment on the energy efficiency side then?
Well, Ras Al Khaimah started working on energy efficiency in a comprehensive manner around 2 years ago. With the establishment of a strategy 2040, we have a strategy for energy efficiency and renewable energy for 2040, targeting 30% energy savings, 20% water savings, and 20% generation from renewable energy. it's a strategy which is comprehensive, so it tackles all the uses, all the main energy uses, and all the main sources of renewable energy, so solar and waste. The strategies, as I said, is comprehensive. This is, I think, something very positive and unique of UAE, the emergence of these comprehensive strategies in Dubai in 2012, 2013, Ras Al Khaimah 2017, Abu Dhabi recently 2019 with the DSM and energy rationalization strategy. There is a lot of momentum. Some other Emirates are maybe going for a more focused approach, like Sharjah energy efficiency program. In Alain, some geographies like Alain are having also a more focused approach, but in general there is a lot of momentum. Of course, this is the first wave, and there is a lot more to do towards, achieving levels of energy efficiency which are on par with European, for example, standards.
Yeah.
But the process is activated, and also the institutional setup is there.
Yeah.
There are offices that have been established to manage the programs. There are regulators, there are policymakers, there are program management entities in most of the Emirates. So the prospect is good. We just need to now move to the next stage.
Okay, we'll come back to some of the RAC-specific barriers to energy efficiency and some of the instruments that RAC are currently putting in place to try and incentivize energy efficiency as part of this panel, so you can talk to us a bit about that. But I'd like to bring in Faisal now and ask him from his perspective what he's currently seeing in the energy efficiency side in Dubai, I guess.
I think to bring practical element to the conversation, I think this whole thing starts with transparency to bring the discussion locally in Dubai. I would say we started by setting strategy for the demand and for the supply side, looking at the energy security from the supply side, and then the energy demand, which is basically reducing the consumptions. So it started with the setting up target, setting up a roadmap, also listing the program that we want to basically pursue, and also looking into the organization that we need to carry this program, and then looking into the activation of all these programs. And finally, it's a reporting and transparency and publication that we do every year, I think, to our stakeholder, to the public as well. And at the end, also our intervention also, when we basically reach ahead of a schedule in terms of saving, in terms of percentage, I think we look at the potential to go higher. If we see a shortage also, we intervene through different policy, maybe different type of intervention that we do. I think this is just a brief of what has happened since the establishment of this whole energy spectrum and the establishment of the Supreme Council of Energy in Dubai.
Thank you very much for that. I don't know if we can now turn to some of the slides that we'd prepared, which are some of the extracts from the CEBC survey. Is that possible? I think there's 3 or 4 slides. So just to summarize, the Clean Energy Business Council had produced a report into the energy efficiency in the whole MENA region. It summarized the current update and state of affairs of the actual energy efficiency in the region. And then, more importantly, for this part of this panel, it also asked the participants in the Middle East market what they thought the barriers were to increasing amounts of energy efficiency in the MENA region. So on the slides now, we've extracted 2 or 3 of the slides from the report. The report will be available. The report will be available to you. if I can work this out. Lovely. So if you want a copy of the full report, please come and see us and we can share the copy of the full report with you. But we've extracted some of the slides. As you can see, this was page 12 of the report itself. So what these slides show you, this first slide talks to you about the business evaluation and forecast and what people in the market in the MENA market currently think about the energy efficiency market looking forward. I don't know if Mustafa, do you have anything in particular you want to comment? Do you share this view?
I think let's say the results of the survey were presented in a separate session where the white paper was presented and the results. So I think for this session we had selected a few slides. One was on the barriers,
yes,
and one was on the instruments. So maybe we can advise the audience to have a look at the CEBC websites for the presentation and the full report. And for now, go to the slide, like you mentioned, for the barriers.
Yeah, so obviously people, there's 5% think that the outlook for the business evaluation for the energy efficiency is very good. 38% is good, and obviously the majority there, 43%, think it's a neutral forecast for energy efficiency. So we can turn now to the next slide, which then talks about why that is, I guess, and why 43% are only neutral about the prospects. So here's the view of the market, I guess, about the difficulties of energy efficiency in this market in MENA. So client willingness is obviously a key factor, along with the complexity of the ESCO contracts. So if I can ask the panelists now to comment on this and say and talk about if they agree with this, and to explain in their opinion and experience why some of these are actually stumbling blocks to greater energy efficiency in the MENA region. So I don't know if, Stefan, you would like to comment on some of these stumbling blocks?
Yeah, I think the natural reaction of people would say that one of the barriers is financing of projects for ESCOs, but you can see here now, it was true a few years ago, but it's no more true. There is today financing for ESCO projects, so this one is not really a barrier anymore. There are ESCOs that are able to finance projects. The major two barriers that we see, client willingness and also complexity of contracts, but I would say it's not just the contracts. Sometimes the projects themselves are complex. What you have to realize that when you put in place an energy efficiency project in a building of a client, usually it's an occupied building, and you start to replace equipment in a building. So the client is very, very cautious on what you're going to change, how you're going to change them, and you have to work in a place that is occupied. The contracts themselves are not simple because the clients are not used to buying energy efficiency. They used to buy goods and buy on usually the cheapest goods. They do they get three different quotes and they buy the cheapest. For energy efficiency, it doesn't work like this. You don't buy the cheapest, you buy the most economical value. So some clients have difficulties to handle this kind of, I would say, purchasing habits, because it's a different way of buying things. Maybe you pay more, but you get more savings. So at the end, you get a better benefit. If you look at buying the cheapest, you're probably going to have the lowest savings. So that's the paradox of the contracts and the procurement of energy efficiency. And I think willingness of the client, I think it's also something that we see. A lot of people are interested, show interest, start the process, and at some point realize that it's not as simple as putting panels on the roof, and then decide that, oh, maybe it's too complex for us, and then everybody has lost time. So there's a lot of, I think it's one of the issues of the ESCOs is to really qualify the client interest at the beginning and making sure that, the client really will go and deploy the project.
I think that's right. I think a lot of it goes to educating the market and spending a lot of time educating clients and off-takers around how it's all going to work, and it will take time, and it's not an easy fix, but obviously keeping an eye on the end result, which is the benefits of the financial benefits and the green credentials. I don't know, Mustafa, if you want to comment on some of these barriers and maybe the funding side of it. And
correct, exactly, because what we see actually that a few years back, funding was the main stumbling block. People were not knowing about the performance contracting business, and it was viewed as a certain risk because it was not known. What we see now in other countries in the region that are actually entering into this energy performance and retrofit business is that financing takes less time to arrange. While for Dubai, or let's say for the UAE, it took several years to move, let's say, from the main barrier to the third one. In other countries, we see that's going much faster because we have reference projects in the region, and that creates a certain confidence. So you see that financial institutions are expediting the process to be able to invest in retrofit projects in other countries in the region.
I think it's like with any industry, like solar in the Middle East and wind. The first projects or the first phase of any new sector takes time, and then it becomes a lot easier, and more funders, debt and equity, come into the market, understand how it's going to work, understand the models. Correct. And then there's a lot more liquidity in that market. And I think we're at the start of that journey in this region, and we've made huge progress. But as you say, there are now funders available. I don't know if you want to give a perspective from RAC about what is this relevant for your emirate?
Absolutely. This is, first of all, very relevant to the type of projects that we are trying to pursue. What I would like also to say, a little bit expand the perspective on this to the broader energy efficiency, so to the participation in the broader energy efficiency programs, and so not only on the retrofit side of it, but also on every other type of project, energy management, new buildings, etc. Some of these barriers apply in general. So, for example, complexity. We have been trying to work on complexity to simplify many of the approaches. And there is still a lot to do, not only at the level of our emirate, but also at the level of the entire supply chain in the country. The Ministry of Energy is now pursuing a demand-side management, a national program for demand-side management, which we hope can also tackle some of these gaps in terms of supply chain complexities induced by the adoption of different standards, different regulations across the different emirates. Client willingness, so how to increase client interest. Yes, I appreciate the efforts in terms of awareness. We need to do more, in terms of awareness, but I don't think it is only a matter of awareness, of communication, of people knowing about the different options that they have. It is about increasing customer interest, addressing one or two super crucial barriers, which is the first one, the fact that there is no business case today for some segments of users and investors. The local population does not have today an incentive in participating in energy efficiency actions. With the low energy tariffs, the subsidized energy tariffs, it is very difficult for any local family to find a business case for intervention. And the same applies also to some government tariffs that are extremely low. The other problem that is very important that has not yet been tackled fully is the problem of the split incentives. So the fact that who invests in a project is not the same entity who then benefits from the savings that are generated. These two problems are, in my opinion, those who represent the main barriers to energy efficiency in this country. And fortunately, I would say, fortunately, something is being done. And something new, actually, is coming up. There is the project that DIWA is undergoing with Etihad ESCO to bring solar to 5,000 homes of the Mohammed bin Rashid housing establishment. This is an example of how to divert incentives into actions. Basically, the government is investing in these projects, and the savings that are generated partly come to the government itself through lower subsidies for those families who will consume less in the future. The same thing is being done by FIWA. In Ras Al Khaimah, 6,000 homes were retrofitted with water fixtures in 2018. And this was done through a direct investment of the government. So this is a way where how this kind of problem can be tackled. There are other ways that we would like also to explore, also in collaboration with federal entities, like the establishment of a fund for energy efficiency, for example. The other problem, instead of split incentives, also has some initial efforts there. The RSB Dubai today is working on the design of a scheme for energy performance ratings of buildings. This is a way, I would say, to sort of bridge the gap between those who invest and those who get the benefits. Most of the gap still needs to be addressed. I mean, a lot more needs to be done there. But it is an effort, and it's something new that is coming up, and we are very positive on this because it has been discussed for long, and finally some important action is being made.
I'd like to finally ask Faisal's view on these market barriers, but maybe at the same time, if we can put the slides back up, sorry, yeah, maybe at the same time, if Faisal wants to comment on some of these stumbling blocks in his opinion, and also then look at some of the initiatives that he thinks have worked or could be brought in to encourage more energy efficiency uptake.
Okay, keeping my answer short and practically speaking, I think sometime when it comes to financing, a project will fail because you have a missing element. You have the willing client on the side, and then you have an ESCO basically on the other side is willing, and then you miss the financial third party who basically support a big project. So instead of pursuing, let's say, 100 buildings, you'll pursue maybe 1 or 2 or 3 buildings only. So this is, to me, I think, a subject that can evolve in the future, where we have the financial institute come into the market and support this retrofit market. The other thing also, the policy, I think, we know very well that the facility management existed long back, more than 20 years, and they've been doing energy efficiency for the building. But I think the penetration is very low for the facility management aspect. So when the policy came, when the ESCO was introduced, the financial model and the contractual model came, I think this increased the penetration of energy efficiency in building. So this is an area where we need to improve. Doesn't apply to Dubai, but it applies in general. This institutional setup is an important thing, and then innovative policy and regulation also comes and support this thing. And then finally, I think mandating data disclosure. I think when you basically pursue a number of projects in 1 year or 2 years or 5 years, I think we should be able to compare building to building. We should be able to also reveal some of these consumption data that we see based on the project that are performed.
Thank you. One of the things, Mustafa, you were mentioned on when we spoke earlier in the week was similar to what's just been mentioned, is this sort of discord between the owner of the building and the actual user of the energy. Not tension, but different competing demands and priorities, I guess. So with that in mind, and some of these incentives that were highlighted in the Clean Energy Business Council survey on energy efficiency, what do you think needs to be done or could be done to improve the uptake of energy efficiency then? Which instruments and policies?
Andrea referred to that with the split incentive. So you have the owner and you have the operator. The owner owns the building and the related assets, but he's not willing to invest or improve the performance because the operator is paying for the bill. We have seen in other countries, for example, where there is a mechanism where the owner, for example, can increase the rent or the lease based on the performance of the building. So this could be an incentive for the owner to invest in his building because the value actually will increase. Also from other studies, it actually was concluded that buildings that perform better have a high occupancy rate. So at the end, someone who leases a facility looks at the bottom line, not only the rent, but also the energy costs. Yeah. So if the rent is a bit higher, but at the same time he's saving a lot on his energy cost, and he saves on the bottom line, then that could also be an incentive.
So they're more of how the market should operate if it was sophisticated enough to work out for itself that their energy bills would be lower in a more energy efficient building.
Correct.
Or if you had a sophisticated landlord, they could charge more, knowing that the amount of energy bills for the tenant would be lower.
Yeah, correct.
That's very interesting. Stefan, I don't know, in your opinion and view, what do you think could be done on the initiative side to promote a greater uptake?
Yeah, I think it was already mentioned, but what Dubai is doing right now, trying to introduce building labeling, meaning buildings that would have a label mentioning the level of their own efficiency, and this would be published and recognized so that people would know before going into a building that, this building is efficient, so why not going into this building? If a building is not efficient, they would be losing probably tenants, and that would force a little bit the owner to do something about his own building, because today the owner is not, as it was just mentioned, not really interested. So that's one thing. The other thing is that was mentioned in the survey is the insurance for guaranteed savings, and this is sometimes a way to reassure the owner or the person that will contract the ESCO that yes, at the end, whatever happens, the savings will be there. Because today, yes, the ESCO is saying I'm guaranteeing the savings, but are you sure that the ESCO is gonna, in case things go wrong, are we sure that the ESCO is gonna do something? So that was mentioned as one of the possibilities, but that's more, I would say, related to a project that has been already, or a client that is already convinced that he wants to do something. It's just a little thing that would make him sign on a project. The overall thing is really still making sure that we stimulate the market and somehow find a way to push people that are not really moving to do something.
I think that's right. I think that goes to this whole education, and that's sadly often a long process of getting the market to fully understand energy efficiency. But that's clearly a process in the UAE that's started and gathering momentum. If I turn now, I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to turn now to the Slido website and some of the questions that we've had. At the moment, we've got 4 questions. One of them is around funding, but I think we've answered that. There's a specific question for Ras Al Khaimah. So the question is, what's the plan for Ras Al Khaimah for net metering, and what payback do you foresee in the near future?
That's a very good question. So at the moment in Ras Al Khaimah, there is no regulation supporting connection of solar energy to the grid. It is something that we are pursuing, but we are still waiting for the Ministry of Energy to issue a policy for it. Okay. And at the moment, we We are pursuing projects on a case-by-case basis with the collaboration of FIWA, where this collaboration is given, the Federal Electricity and Water Authority. So for now, we are going with pilot projects, one by one. The whole strategy was started a couple of years ago. We have started now, we have 2 pilot projects that are already contracted. Yeah. And these are for carports. And,
on a net metering basis?
No, there is no net metering. It's
okay.
In Ras Al Khaimah there is not yet net metering, so there is no regulation for it. And we are trying to get the support of the Ministry of Energy and FIWA to issue a net metering facility, which will allow anybody to connect to the grid under certain standards.
So these 2 pilot projects are solar on carports, and then the owner gets to use the electricity?
Yes, those projects are projects where there is no export to the grid.
Yeah.
Where even the peak load is lower than the consumption of the entities. This is possible in many cases. It's possible for many industrial sites where the consumption, for example, is much higher than the generation. But even then, there are some regulatory aspects that need to be clarified. Anyway, we are proceeding with this. We hope a regulation will be issued soon, and this would resolve, I think, all the barriers for solar generation.
Thank you for that update on the net metering in Ras Al Khaimah. Moving on to 2 more questions, and one question is there a country leading the pack on energy efficiency and resolving issues around financing that would be a good example to follow? So I don't know, guys, if you want to comment about who's sort of leading the pack on energy efficiency.
I think there are different countries in the world that are leading that journey, but there are different aspects that actually contribute to that. For example, the geographic location. Yeah. Some can use geothermal energy because they are positioned in a region where they just drill in the ground and get hot water, for example, or other natural resources, wind, where you can actually utilize the wind. But I also still believe that it's not always easy to just copy-paste a policy from one country to another country, because you have to understand the local dynamics and the situation and customize it to the local needs. But I cannot name like one country that is leading.
But in this region, the UAE is probably one of the leaders in the MENA region.
Correct.
Okay.
In this region,
I think the question, was directed at the MENA region.
But
that's great. Thank you. Yeah. I think then there's a question or maybe a comment here about when we talked about some of the policies, or how do we get more people involved in energy efficiency. What about higher municipality tax for buildings that are not energy efficient? I don't know if the panel have got a view about that and how realistic that is. Faisal?
Yeah, I just want to tweak the question a bit. If we basically look at the status of Dubai since the establishment of the ESCO market, I think we already have reached around 260 gigawatt hour saving for electricity, and also around 160 million imperial gallon for the water. And this basically represents around 180 million as we speak. And if we look at our target, which is 30,000 buildings by 2030, so we're talking about potential for 2 billion dirham, which will be basically available for private market also to think about in the next, let's say, 10 years or so. And of course, in terms of policy, I think it starts with the awareness, creating the market, creating the super ESCO, coming up with the contractual model, certification of ESCO as well, and continue to make awareness, and then continue to reach the end user as we sit here today and then speak in this platform. So we should continue do this. We should continue to reach the financial also institute. And this way we can increase the penetration and the horizon 2025 and 2030 and beyond. And I think sometimes beyond the minimum code, we think of net zero energy building, how to reach this full potential of saving.
Thank you very much. That's the end of the questions that I've got on this website, Slido. I'd like to offer the opportunity for anybody in the audience that may have a question that is not put it on the, yeah. Do we have a mic? Guys, I think there were 2 questions. If you can please introduce yourself and then ask the question, yeah.
My name is Hussein Saraira from Jordan. I will ask 2 quick questions. The first one, what is the optimum ratio of grid efficiency? We have a difference between what we are generate, what we are transmit, and what we are consume. What is the minimum ratio of leakage of our electricity nowadays globally? The second question, we have a problem between the peak of load and the peak of generation, because we have renewable energy resources now is developing in our region. Can we make complementary projects that we can use the energy that we are not needed in the peak of generation? We can use it in other ways, such as refreshing water maybe, or making another things that when we are have a peak of generation. Thank you.
Okay, so the first question was around leakage from the grid, and then the second question is, what does a country like Jordan do with an excess capacity? So does somebody want to tackle the first question on leakage from the grid?
I think with respect to line loss and leakage, I think this is a question usually directed to the power generation, which is in Dubai, is DEWA. I think they have already ranked among top 5 worldwide, and they continue to basically find ways to basically reach the top in terms of efficiency with the grid and so. With respect to the, I think, the storage and so, I think this will be a challenge all the time, since we're depending on fossil fuel as we speak, and the energy storage is still a business. It's basically developing, and it's slowly developing, so we don't have a large storage capacity when it comes to lithium battery and so. But we're already pursuing the CSP in Dubai around 700 megawatt plus. This will finish in 2021, so this will add some good capacity, storage capacity to the grid. And of course, the solar rooftop, which comes with the battery also, that also you can consider part of the storage. Other than that, I think whatever we basically produce from the fossil fuel point of view, we will consume till we have the battery technology developing maybe beyond 2030 and so.
Thank you. I think also on the, if the excess power, countries like Jordan can look at exporting some of that as well, and I know Jordan are actively doing that with some of the neighboring countries. Was there another question? If you can introduce yourself, thank you.
Yeah, so my name's Alan Freeman, I work with Innova. So I have a question in relation to energy efficiency and energy performance contracts. So I'm relatively new to this region, but in my opinion, the energy performance contracts that I've seen are relatively short in terms of short-term vision, in terms of payback, 3, 4, 5 year payback. My question is in relation to the next stage, or maybe some longer term planning in terms of energy projects. Could you look at projects with 10, 15 year net present value calculations, which would give you a long-term period to recover your investment? So you'd look at your net benefit after 15 years. And also, if you have a long-term contract, you could introduce some renewable power into it. So if you take, for example, your energy efficiency measures, which may take 25 or 30% of your energy bill, if you included in your tender a requirement for solar power, for example, that could make another major impact. So you could possibly reduce your energy consumption by 50 or 60% in one tender instead of 20 to 30 or 35.
Thank you for the question. I think it's probably a question driven to the developers on the, so Stefano, Mustafa, I don't know if you want to look at the duration of the contracts that you're seeing.
I think the duration of the contract, this has been evolving a little bit. Some years back, the first contracts that we were doing were like 5-7 years duration. Now we see contracts for 10 years more frequently. For example, in Saudi Arabia, all the contracts that are being launched by the Super ESCO are 10-year duration. It's true that compared to Europe or the North America, where contracts are easily for 15 years, 20 years, 25 years, it's different. But you have to realize that here, the buildings are also in, I would say, less efficient than what you would see in Europe and in North America. So in those geographies, you need to have long-term contracts because the buildings are already quite efficient. So to get really more efficiency, you need a longer payback time. Here, many of the buildings are really not efficient, and even with very short-term contract, you can get a lot of savings. Now, adding renewables, yes, this has been considered many times. I've not seen many contracts where it has been combined with energy efficiency and solar, for example, but it's feasible. Usually, clients kind of decouple the two, because the paybacks are, again, for the same reason, are not the same. So you would do an energy efficiency project that is going to be quite fast to pay back, but then the renewable part of it would be quite long. So then sometime when it's very different, it's better to decouple the two projects. If I think the duration would be similar, then why not combining them together? I think that's my view, at least.
No, but in addition, correct. So it's actually an evolving process. In the past, we saw a relatively short, let's say, contract periods. Now it's moving up to 8 years, 10 years. There are contracts in the market, ESCO contracts, where the duration is for 8 years or even 10 years. Also, solar is part of those, let's say, performance contracts. A project I know of in Dubai with a property developer, they signed an energy performance contract to retrofit their buildings and also to install approximately 5 megawatt of solar PV on the roofs. So it's also a way to bring down the payback of solar. If you look at solar only, the payback will be, let's say, significantly higher. When you combine it with other retrofit solutions, you can bring down the overall payback.
Yeah. I think maybe if I can add something to this. I think this question of how to promote deep retrofits is a very important question, in particular for this region. What do we have here? We have expats who, even when they buy a property, they have, on average, a relatively short permanence in the UAE, few years, on average. And then we have UAE nationals who stay probably in their house, in their villa, for much longer. But those do not have an incentive because their energy tariff is relatively low. Mm-hmm. So how to trigger deep retrofit is a very tricky problem, very difficult problem. Europe has been working on this. In Europe, this problem has been tackled recently. And the whole thing is about allowing whoever invests to monetize their investment. In practice, it is about making a long-term project viable for whoever invests. One of the ways this is done, as we mentioned before, is to recognize properties who are more efficient than others. And this probably the scheme that we discussed before, an energy performance rating scheme, helps in doing this. Other mechanisms, I think Mustafa was mentioning before, linking this increased quality of the building to a rent, to an increase in rent, is also another mechanism. Without those, I doubt that long-term deeper retrofits will ever take place in this place, because it is they are disadvantaged by the type of demographics and the type of mechanisms, as I mentioned, that are in place today in UAE.
I think we're going to have to leave it there. If I can please ask you kindly to thank Andrea, Faisal, Stefan and Mustafa for their great contribution to this panel. That would be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your participation. If you can